You know, the greatest travesty in the journey of America has been the lack of honesty and truthfulness in history. We teach our children what we want them to hear, and maybe that may not be right. It's just according to where we're at in the land of America and what we want to tell our story. I believe in factual history, and I believe if the truth was told, we would all be better off for that. The Old South was before the plantations, before a lot of the filthy rich, I call them, saw a way of making money off the backs of the human race. Life was not as cruel as it was made out to be. Sure, there was people that worked for farms in South Georgia. That's true. But there was also people that worked for the big mercantile industry in New York, in the sweatshops, Chicago. And as in some plantations in the South, people were not treated fairly, but there was also places in the North where they were not treated fairly. And one wrong does not make a right, or two wrongs don't make a right. They were not only the African American was mistreated, there was a lot of immigrants from Europe and other parts of the world that were not treated fairly. The American Indian was very receptive of the Europeans and opened their doors and even helped to feed them and clothe them. And look how they were treated. Their people were raped, their homes were burnt, their land was stolen. If you want to hear a real good story, read the history of Georgia, where Governor Troup literally laughed at President Adams and told him, "You won't have time to raise a militia, we'll just take the land of the Indians." And he did, 1835. History of Georgia. They literally stole the land. Put the Indians on wagons and took them to Oklahoma and put them in camps. So you talk about how people are mistreated. Everybody's been mistreated. The rich mistreat the poor. It's been going on since the beginning of time and will continue to go on. But in the Old South, there was a lot of good, integrity and honesty and character. Even today, that type of life is respected now, and the South is beginning to be accepted as the place of humility and honesty and character, and where people are treated decent. It was not, don't judge the South by a few plantation owners. They were brutal, we admit that. But there's also goodness. The people were decent and honest. My daddy, I'm gonna give you an example. Let's use my mother's daddy, 3/4 Indian. Land was taken away from him, but he ran a country store. And he would feed he said if the government was too sorry to feed the orphans and the widows, he would, and he did. And when he died, in the annals of history of Mitchell County, Covella, Georgia, go check it for yourself. It said that people were trying to get into church for a 1/4 of a mile in both directions to pay respect to Ben Blackwell. Yeah, he sold liquor, but he also took care of the widows and orphans, and he treated people right. And then my daddy, we had a freeze in 54, 55, and killed all the farms, crops, and half the trees in Georgia, of fruit-bearing trees, pecans, peaches, and so forth. A neighbor of my daddy's walked to the house that morning and just totally devastated. He happened to be a black man. He said, "Mr. Ernest, what in the world are we going to do?" Eddie said, I'm gonna loan you enough money to get your crop planted, and we're gonna go again. The next day we planted the garden. The next day we started planting our crops. That winter, Daddy went back to work in Albany at the pecan plant, and Mr. Ward went to Albany and got his boys a job laying blocks at a state college they started building. You see, together we survived. Character brought them together, not apart. Not to take advantage of, but a hand up. Didn't matter if you were black or white or red or yellow. It was a matter of helping everybody. We had a couple of little boys that lived about half a mile away, called Short Stuff and Shank. They were being raised by their grandmama and grandpa. The granddaddy was crippled from polio, and it made just squeezed out enough to barely survive on his little farm. But there was a little table on the back porch at our house. My mama fed those two boys 2 meals a day. I'll guarantee you they'll never forget her. Matter of fact, they left home and went to New Jersey and got a job as bellhops. And every year they'd come home to see Grandmama and Grandpapa, and they'd stop at my mama's house first to see my mama. So you see, it wasn't a matter of who you were. It was a matter of what you were. And it was what you could do for somebody, not take away. Got a lot of good lessons in life about character and integrity. All of us can learn from things like this. Back then, in the 50s, farmers were losing their farms because of the freeze, and bankers and lawyers were taking those farms in record numbers because the farmers didn't have no money to make another crop. Parents would bring the children by our house and to stay with us a few days because they knew my mom and daddy feed them. We had a smokehouse we always filled up every year and every winter. And pantry we always kept full of things that we canned every summer. It was a saying that if it stopped long enough, Ann Lee would put it in a jar. I also heard my mama say, Ernest, when these people would come by the house, you just gonna give it all away, because he never turned anybody away. Might not give them money, but he gave them something to eat. And back then, that was worth more than money.